Welcome to the Berean Remnant. I'm your host, Dr. Bernard Mauser, and today we're going to be discussing Labor Day. Now, for those of us that are familiar with the scripture, we know that Proverbs explicitly links work and wealth. And so part of the idea of Labor Day is to celebrate American labor and to give a day off for all the human flourishing that American labor has caused in our country. So it's a federal holiday that basically celebrates the American worker. If you look up online the history of Labor Day, what you tend to find is propaganda related to labor unions. And they explicitly try to link Labor Day with union labor. And so what I want to do today is debunk 3 popular myths that labor unions set forth about Labor Day. And these 3 myths, the first one is the myth that labor unions abolished and helped abolish child labor in factories. The second myth is that labor unions helped improve the working conditions for a lot of American workers. And the third myth is that labor unions are really for the common man. So they're for most of us. Now, growing up, I loved having the day off for Labor Day, having picnics, swimming with friends, playing sports, things like that. And as I got older, I definitely enjoyed having one paid holiday of having an enjoyable time on Labor Day. So I think a lot of us do like those things. But what about these myths? What do we do with it? Is it really the case that labor unions are mainly to applaud about these things? Here's what I want to point out. Suppose I told you that this symbol, the bat symbol, anytime you see the bat symbol, it actually keeps away snakes and lions and bears. Now, how do I know that? Well, ever since I've had this bat symbol with me, there's been no snakes or lions or bears in this room. So it's basically a repellent for these things. Now, in logic, we would call this the post hoc fallacy. How do you know this is the case? Well, every time I see this, what I don't see are snakes or bears or lions. So it follows after this, therefore it's because of this. So it's from the Latin words, post hoc, ergo propter hoc. And usually when I'm teaching the logic class to students, the classic example is the cause of the sunrise is going to be a rooster crowing, because every time a rooster crows, the sun rises. Therefore, the cause of the sun rising is the rooster crowing. And what I want to submit to you is each of these 3 things that labor unions basically take credit for, it's accidental to the fact that labor unions exist that these things happen. What are the real causes? Let's look at the first one. What is it that basically stopped child labor in factories? Well, in America, one of the reasons is the general wealth of Americans increased. So since parents care more for their kids than labor unions or government, it just makes sense that when they're making enough money, they don't send their kids to the factories. So with the increase in wealth and societal wealth and the standard of living, what you find is a decrease in child employment. What about these third world countries? What it tends to be the case is when we ban things that are made by children in third world countries, it doesn't mean these kids all of a sudden are wealthy and they're going to school and they're living a great life. It basically displaces them from the preferred job that they had, which was, even if it was less agreeable conditions than what we're used to as Americans, in the third world, it's a better condition, or they would have chosen another profession. And so we displace them into more hazardous areas that pay less. Usually they either go into human trafficking or into farms that are significantly more dangerous. So we have to realize it wasn't labor unions that did this. It was the increase in the standard of living in the market. A second claim, what about improved conditions? Well, again, the labor unions are taking credit for something they didn't actually cause. So it's not that you can't find some things that the labor unions try to collectively bargain for. But what's the case is, suppose I offered you a job for $40 an hour, but you knew it'd be terrible working conditions. And another person said, listen, I can only pay $8 an hour, but you're going to have a wonderful work experience. Which would you pick? I know a lot of people would pick the $40 an hour with the harder working conditions. What are the harder working conditions? Maybe no AC, no heat. No heat in the winter, no AC in the summer. Maybe you're standing on a hard floor. You have to stand all day, no sitting. Whereas the other worker who's getting $8 an hour will have those amenities. They'll get to sit all day. They'll have AC in the summer and heat in the winter. A lot of people would pick the $40. The unseen costs are on the employer, and then a lot of times they're passed along to those who are buying the product. And so there's a trade-off. And if we had freedom for those trade-offs, freedom from what the labor union demands were, then you're actually significantly better off. We all want more freedom to less freedom. And what, again, you find is the market, because businesses are actually, they're trying to solicit the best workers. So what are some inducements to work at one place versus another? One is money. Another is amenities. There's other benefits that they can offer. Some jobs have a company car. This competition between businesses is one of the things that raised the standard of working in different environments. So because they're competing for employees as well with one another, this basically gets them to up their game. If they want the best workers, these workers who want the best wages and the best environment, they're going to pick depending on who's offering them the best things. It wasn't labor unions that did this. What about that third myth? They're for the common man. As a matter of fact, they're not. There's two economists from Ohio University who did a study, and they analyzed over the course of 50 years how much labor unions have decreased the size of the American market. They found that the American market would be $50 trillion larger than it currently is. So the way to think of the economic market in the United States is as if it's a growing pie. So there's wealth that exists today that didn't exist when you were born or when your kids were born. So when I was born, nobody had a home computer. Today, we're, for the most part, all carrying computers around in our pockets. The cost of a computer used to be astronomical. Not a lot of families could afford it. Today, everybody has it in their pocket, and it's very affordable. Sometimes they'll give you these computers that are also cell phones for very low cost. Sometimes they're giving them to you in exchange for a contract. And so it wasn't labor unions that did this. It was the market itself. What about this claim of $50 trillion? How does that impact you and I, even if we are a union worker? Think of it this way. If I were to spend $1 million a day, how many days would it take to spend $1 trillion? To spend $1 trillion, spending $1 million a day, it would take 2,740 years. Now, we are $50 trillion poorer because of labor unions, according to these economists' study. So how long would it take to spend $1 million a day at that rate of $50 trillion? Well, it would take you 137,000 years at $1 million a day to reach $50 trillion. That is wealth that we don't have access to. That represents a lot of jobs that never came to be, a lot of products that never existed because of the cost of unions. And the primary people that unions target are actually the unskilled, and there's a long history of targeting minorities. So in the late 1800s, you could read many of the labor union leaders targeting the Chinese who were immigrating and taking American jobs. In the early 1900s, you could see that they were targeting black labor for the white blue-collar jobs because black labor was moving from southern cities north to do the same jobs that whites were doing for less money. And they wanted to keep them out of the market. And then more recently, a lot of the labor unions tried to keep Mexican Americans out of the market. So there's a long history of discrimination that labor unions have been involved in. So much for sticking up for the common man. So these are the three myths I want you to think about for Labor Day that we could celebrate this Judeo-Christian tradition that has long provided a lot of human flourishing and wealth, the Proverbs, and the Protestant work ethic that was so strong in early America, especially through studying the Proverbs and maxims like, if a man doesn't work, he shouldn't eat. Take your day of rest and not be duped by some of these labor union myths.